Hello, my name is Stephen Holliday, and I'm a student at Full Sail University studying digital cinematography. This is my final project for History of Motion Picture Arts. Horror is defined as an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. Main elements of horror. Number one, imagery. Imagery is usually some type of monster, knives, chainsaw, stabbing weapons, death, torture, blackbirds, things like that. Music. The music is always creepy, weird, and it kind of leads you into things that's unexpected. And the setting always takes place in haunted houses, abandoned warehouses, mazes, woods, or crazy places like that. The Haunted Castle, directed by Georges Méliès in 1896, is the earliest recorded horror film released in the United States. In 1931, Tom Browning directed Dracula, and this was the first time Dracula ever made his appearance. Also in 1931, Frankenstein was released, and that was directed by James Whale. Arthur Lubin directed the movie Black Friday that was released in 1940, and it was a horror movie at the time, but the ironic thing is that that day actually exists and it is pretty terrifying. In 1947, that's when the Cold War began officially, and the horror movies were centered around things that had people watching the skies. The 1960s was a milestone for all filmmaking of America, not just horror. This was the end of the Hays Code, which restricted certain content to be shown on screen and actually introduced the MPAA rating system. The rating system allowed filmmakers to put specific content in their movies based off the rating so they could actually add more violence and more blood. It was pivotal. In 1960, Alfred Hitchcock gave us Psycho, which is arguably the most scary movie of all time because of the famous scene in the shower that had the intense stabbing music, the hard cuts, and the very uncomfortable feel made the entire world almost scared to take a shower. The 1980s was my favorite decade of horror movies. Yes, I was born in 1987, but the 80s are all the type of stuff I like anyway. The music, the drive, the theme for every movie back then was, hey teenagers, don't have sex or don't do this or you will die by this thing. The 80s introduced iconic creatures and monsters because of the new practical effects that were now coming on the screen. I'm talking about Child's Play, Chucky that came out in 1988. Was awesome. The little doll running across the thing, that's one of my favorites. Eduardo Sanchez in 1999 gave the world the Blair Witch Project. This was a big foreshadow inspiration for all found footage type horror movies that are to come later. In 2004, Saw came out, the Saw series. This was also directed by James Wan, the original one. And the Saw series was a very torture type movie. Audience nowadays want to see just torture and brutality at its finest. It was crazy. In 2007, Paranormal Activity comes to the world. Paranormal Activity pretty much is the found footage, so to speak, movie that gives you that first person perspective of paranormal things happening in the house. Again, the first of its kind started, I would say, in 1999 with the Blair Witch Project, but in 2007, Paranormal Activity took it to a whole new level, introduced an idea and theme that something's in your house that you can't see, and had a lot of sound effects that you actually hear in your house. Crazy stuff. In 2013, James Wan directed The Conjuring, which on paper is the highest grossing horror film ever. It came out in July of 2013. It made over $41.8 million in its first weekend, which is unheard of for a horror film. Thanks for watching my video presentation about the horror film genre as it has evolved over time.